On the coldest night of December, a man named Thomas sat alone in a small, dimly lit room that didn't feel like home anymore. The walls were bare, the air felt heavy, and the silence was so deep that it almost echoed inside his chest. This was the house he once filled with laughter, family pictures, and weekend music. But now it was just a reminder of everything he had lost. It all started 9 months earlier. Thomas had worked at the same company for 23 years. He wasn't the loudest, the smartest, or the most impressive, but he was faithful. He showed up early, stayed late, and carried the weight no one else wanted. Until the morning, they called him into the office and told him without emotion, "We're downsizing. Today is your last day." He walked to his car with a cardboard box of everything he owned at that job. A framed photo of his daughter, a coffee mug with chipped paint, a pen set he got as an award years ago. It felt like the world had quietly closed a door in his face. But that was only the beginning. The financial pressure grew heavier, and the stress began affecting his health. His marriage, already fragile, cracked under the weight. His daughter left for college and barely called home. And little by little, Thomas felt something inside him dim, like a candle flickering in a room where no one bothered to close the window. He prayed at first. He prayed with confidence. He prayed with belief. But as time passed, the silence grew louder. "Why won't you answer me, God?" he whispered one night. "I'm trying. I'm holding on. But it feels like you're nowhere near." There are moments in life when a person doesn't need a miracle. They just need a sign that heaven is still listening. And that was the kind of moment Thomas was living through. He wasn't angry at God, just tired, bone tired, soul tired. He spent his days sitting by the window, watching cars pass by, wondering how everyone else seemed to keep moving forward while he stayed stuck in the same place. He didn't tell anyone how deeply he was drowning inside. People saw him smile politely at the grocery store. No one saw him lie awake at 3 a.m., staring at the ceiling, wondering if his life still mattered. One evening, he reached the point he had feared the most, the moment when he whispered to himself, "Maybe God really has forgotten me." But something happened that night. It didn't come as thunder. It didn't come as a miracle. It didn't come as a voice shaking the walls. It came as a question gently rising inside his heart, a question he couldn't ignore. What if God is closer in the quiet than he ever was in the noise? That question stirred him. It unsettled him. It felt like someone had just sat beside him in the darkness and placed a hand on his shoulder. He didn't understand it yet. He didn't know what it meant. But for the first time in months, he didn't feel completely alone. And somewhere deep within that heavy silence, something small, almost invisible, began to flicker again. Hope. He woke up the next morning to a strange kind of silence. Not the cold, empty silence he had been drowning in for months, but a softer one. Almost like the world was finally catching its breath. Sunlight slipped through the blinds, falling across the floor in quiet golden stripes. For a moment, he simply sat there on the edge of his bed, hands hanging loosely between his knees, listening to the stillness. He whispered into the empty room, "God, I don't know what you're doing. I don't even know if you hear me anymore. But if you're here, I need you to show me how to breathe again." No answer came. No booming voice. No miracle unfolding in front of him. But something did shift deep inside his tired chest. A small warmth. A soft nudge. A quiet knowing that hadn't been there before. He stood up and walked to the window. Outside, life continued as if nothing had shattered. Cars passing, leaves brushing against pavement, people hurrying toward places they believed mattered. For months, he had felt disconnected from all of it. But today, he watched differently. Today, he wondered if maybe, just maybe, God had been in these simple moments all along. Later that afternoon, he went for a walk. His legs felt heavy, as if carrying months of grief with every step, but he moved forward anyway. On the corner of his street, he saw an older man holding a cardboard sign. Not begging, not complaining, just standing. The sign read, "Still here, still grateful." He froze. Those 4 words hit him harder than any sermon. Still here, still grateful. 2 things he had not been for a very long time. The old man looked up, and for a split second their eyes met. There was no pity in the stranger's gaze, only a deep, quiet understanding. A kind of compassion that said, "I know what it feels like to lose things, but I also know what it means to survive them." He kept walking, but something inside him began unraveling, threads of anger loosening, threads of hope stitching themselves back together. Maybe it wasn't dramatic. Maybe it wasn't supernatural, but it was real. That evening, he found himself sitting alone at his small kitchen table. A cup of untouched coffee sat in front of him, long gone cold. He folded his hands slowly, not out of habit, but out of surrender. "God," he whispered, voice trembling, "I've been angry with you. I've been afraid of you. And for so long. I thought you took everything from me. But maybe you were trying to lead me somewhere quieter, somewhere where I could finally hear you again." His breath shook as the weight of his confession settled in the room. "I don't know how to begin again. I don't know how to rebuild what I've lost. But if you're willing to stay, if you're willing to walk me through this, I'm willing too." And for the first time in a long time, the silence didn't feel empty. It felt holy. He wiped his eyes with the back of his hand and leaned back. Memories of everything he'd lost drifted through his mind, his job, his sense of purpose, the relationship he once thought would last forever. But now, instead of feeling crushed beneath their weight, he felt something unfamiliar rising above it. Courage. Tiny, fragile, but real. As the night deepened, he opened his old Bible. The pages felt heavier than he remembered, like they carried stories meant for wounded people. He flipped until his eyes stopped on a verse he hadn't read in years. "The Lord is close to the brokenhearted." He whispered it again, slower this time, letting it sink into the cracks inside him. "Close to the brokenhearted." "God, if you're close, help me feel it, even just once, even just for a moment." The room stayed quiet, yet something in that quiet wrapped around him like a blanket he didn't realize he needed. For the first time, he didn't feel forgotten. Not entirely. Not anymore. He closed his eyes. And in that quiet moment, something inside him finally exhaled. He wasn't healed yet. He wasn't restored yet. But he wasn't alone. And that was enough to keep him going. That was enough to keep him believing. That was enough to keep him alive. When the morning finally broke, Samuel sat on the edge of the small cabin bed, listening to the forest breathe. For weeks, the silence had felt like a punishment, an empty room where God used to live. But today, the quiet felt different. It didn't press down on him. It didn't accuse him. It simply waited. He stood and pushed open the door. Cool air touched his face, carrying the scent of pine and early morning rain. He closed his eyes, letting it seep into him. He whispered, not even sure if his voice could still hold prayer. "God, are you here?" A long pause. Long enough for doubt to crawl in again. Long enough for memories to whisper, "You lost everything." Why would he answer you now? But then something in the wind shifted. It wasn't a voice. It wasn't a sound. It was a stillness so gentle, so steady, that Samuel felt it wrap around him like a blanket pulled over a trembling child. For the first time in months, he didn't feel alone. He sat on the porch and let tears fall quiet, tired tears from a man who had fought too long on his own. He whispered, "Lord, I don't know how to start again. I don't know what to rebuild. I don't know who I am anymore." The silence answered, with a thought that didn't come from him. "You are mine. And that is enough for today?" Samuel pressed his face into his hands as the weight of those words washed over him. It didn't erase the grief. It didn't undo the losses, but it filled the space where hopelessness used to live. He breathed in deeply, slow, steady, believing for the first time in a long time that healing can begin even in broken places. He stood up and walked to the small river behind the cabin. The water moved quietly, carrying fallen leaves and morning light. He watched the current roll by and felt God whisper again, not in thunder, not in miracles, but in a truth so soft it could only be heard by a heart ready to receive it. I never left you. I never stopped speaking. You were just too hurt to hear me. Samuel's chest tightened, not with pain, but with release. Months of buried sorrow rose and finally found their way out. He knelt on the riverbank, running his fingers through the cold water. God, if you're really here, if you never left. His voice cracked. Teach me how to live again. Teach me how to trust again. Teach me how to begin again. A warm breeze brushed across his shoulders. Not the wind, not the weather, but presence. Holy, steady, unhurried presence. For the first time, Samuel didn't rush to define it or question it or doubt it. He simply received it. He walked back to the cabin, picked up the old Bible he hadn't touched since the funeral, and opened it randomly. His eyes fell on a verse he hadn't read in years. The Lord is near to the brokenhearted and saves those who are crushed in spirit. Samuel let out a shaky laugh, half disbelief, half gratitude. Okay, he whispered. I hear you. He spent the rest of the day doing something he never thought he could do again. Rebuilding not his old life, not his old dreams, but his heart. One slow breath, one simple prayer, one quiet moment at a time. He swept the cabin, cooked a small meal, wrote a letter to the only friend he had left, stepped outside again just to thank God for the sunlight. Each tiny act was a seed, planted gently back into the garden of his soul. And that night, as he lay down, the silence settled around him again, not empty, not cold, but full of presence, full of peace, full of a God who had not abandoned him in the ruins, but had waited patiently for the moment Samuel could hear him again. Before sleep carried him away, Samuel prayed one last time. Lord, thank you for meeting me in the quiet. I didn't lose everything after all. I found you. And heaven, in its gentle way, whispered back, and I never stopped holding you.